Did you know that the British never managed to capture 40% of India? About 95 million people in India were separate from British rule. Yes, even in India, living under British slavery, there was a large section of the public that was not directly connected to the British. Look, we have all heard the story of how the British captured India and plundered it heavily. But when we say that the British enslaved India, how big a part did they actually enslave? The boundaries of India that we see today, let's include Pakistan too, it was also a British colony, it was our part. So was this entire India a British colony? The answer is no. You will be surprised to know that the British never ran direct rule over 100% of India. Now, the question arises that if the British were so powerful, why didn't they completely capture India? And an even bigger question is, which were these areas that the British didn't control? Why did they capture Bengal, Awadh, Jhansi and Punjab, but leave some areas? The British didn't even take control of very small princely states with an area of less than 2 kilometers. So how did so many large areas remain out of their direct reach? Were the British not powerful enough to take control of these areas as well? Or did they have a strategy? Was their motive something else? Was it their mercy? What was the reason behind all this? In today's video, you will get the answer to this question. In this video, you will know the conspiracies of British colonialism that will surprise you. So watch this video till the end. Now, first let's clear up a big misconception. Did the British truly rule all of India? The direct answer is no. This is a huge myth that we have been getting from school books. If you look carefully at the map of pre-independence India, you will find that the real map of the British India was like a mosaic. In this map, the parts you are seeing in yellow are the parts of British India, but the parts in red were all parts of princely states. The British were ruling over only 1/3 of the total area. The rest of the area belonged to at least 600 princely states, both small and large. These were native states, meaning princely states, meaning kings and princes ruled here. They had their own rules, their own army and their own administration. About 40% of the land and about 93 million people were under Indian kings and nawabs. In this way, you must have understood that in reality, India was divided into two parts. One was British India, where the British had direct rule, and the second was Princely India, where Indian kings governed. A large population of India lived in these states. But the question remains, why didn't the British capture these parts? Look, to understand this question, we need to understand the history of the 18th and 19th century very briefly. Trading in things like gold, spices, cotton, cloth and indigo. Historian Ramchandra Guha writes in his book, Gandhi Before India, that in the initial phase, the company was interested only in commercial profit, not in building a large empire. But slowly, situations started changing. In the 18th century, the Mughal Empire began to weaken. Regional powers like the Marathas, Sikhs, and the rulers of Mysore began to emerge as new states. The company thought of taking advantage of these circumstances. Then in 1757, Robert Clive defeated the Nawab of Bengal, Siraj-ud-Dowla, in the Battle of Plassey. This war laid the foundation of British power in India. After Plassey, the company slowly started expanding its presence in India. But their method was not one of the direct war and victory. Historian Bipan Chandra wrote in his book, India's Struggle for Independence, that the British strategy was very clever. They started offering military support to Indian kings. This was the Subsidiary Alliance, in which kings had to remove their own army and keep the company's army in the state. In return, the company said, "We will give you complete security." However, the entire cost of this security had to be paid by the king himself. If the king was unable to pay this expense, the company would annex a part of his estate. This is what happened later. Many kings had to lose their throne because of the Subsidiary Alliance. Now you must be thinking that if this alliance was so bad, why did the Indian rulers accept it? The reason was internal disunity. One king feared the other. The Marathas were threatened by Mysore and Mysore by the Nizams. The British took full advantage of this mutual distrust. The Nizam of Hyderabad was one of the first to accept this treaty. After this, Awadh and many other states also got caught in its grip. Now, if you pay the attention, the British cleverly adopted a strategy where their cost was low and their profit was high. The kings paid the British army for their own treasury, meaning the British didn't need to spend money to maintain their own army. The British only took care of the administration of their army and the money spent on it. They didn't need to involve themselves in the administration, society, and religion of a state like the kings used to do. In this way, the British army was getting stronger day by day with the king's money. Slowly, the British understood that political control could bring them even more profit. So they started dethroning the kings. For this, they also brought in the Doctrine of Lapse, meaning if a king had no heir, the British could directly take control of that state. And even if a king was not running the administration of his state properly, the British army or the East India Company could capture it. Like Awadh, Jhansi, Satara were examples of this. Lord Dalhousie was behind this policy, and his policy gained control over a large part of British India, which largely continued until India's independence. This was the first phase where the British ran their indirect control throughout the Subsidiary Alliance. And when the British army started getting stronger and the British began to understand India's system of governance, they captured important states like Sikhs, Mysore, Bengal, and Awadh. But in this whole scene, an event happens and the British campaign stops in a way. This event was the revolt of 1857. Historian Eric Stokes writes in his book, The Peasant Arms of 1857, that this revolt was not just by soldiers, it also included farmers, landowners, and common people. This revolt was a lesson for the British. After this, they changed their policy in 1858. The rule of India went directly from the East India Company to the British Crown. Queen Victoria issued a proclamation in which she promised that they would no longer interfere in affairs of Indian kings and would not annex their estates. Now you must be thinking that this was a huge deal. Had the British truly changed? No, this was just a political move. The real meaning of this proclamation was that the British changed their policy from direct occupation to indirect rule. The British understood that instead of completely eliminating Indian kings, keeping them under their control was more beneficial. These kings could become loyal allies for them. They felt that these states would act as a buffer for any possible revolt against the British rule. For example, the British learned a big lesson in revolt of 1857. The states that the British had annexed sounded the bugle of rebellion against the British. But there were many such states that also supported the British. When the fire of revolt erupted in cities like Delhi, Lucknow, and Kanpur, many kings like Sindhia of Gwalior and the Maharaja of Patiala supported the British. They not only suppressed the revolt in their own territories but also provided military aid to the British. Now, if these states had also stood against the British, it would have become difficult for the British to stay in India. Holding on to India would have become next to impossible for the British. It was proven that these states could act as a buffer for the British, meaning if anyone revolted tomorrow, these states would also work to save the British Empire. That is why a second phase began after 1857 revolt, where a large part of India was under the British Empire and the rest was ruled by about 600 princely states. But was this the only reason why the British did not capture princely states? The answer is still no. This was just one reason. But there were many other reasons why the British did not take control of these states, these little and large states. A big reason among them was the Indian geography and diversity. The British knew that India was a large country with a complex nature. There were mountains in some places, jungles in others, and deserts elsewhere. For example, states located in the foothills of Himalayas like Tihri Garhwal or some hill areas and the desert states of Rajasthan were not particularly profitable for the British. By capturing them, they would neither get much revenue nor any major commercial benefit. In such a situation, why spend resources and military power on them when they could be controlled from afar? Historians say that the British policies were entirely based on practical needs. Wherever the British felt they should capture, they did so using every means possible, by force, by money, by punishment, or by diplomacy. For example, areas like Punjab, where the Sikh Empire was very powerful, direct capture was not easy. Maharaja Ranjit Singh had strengthened his empire greatly. His army was trained in the European style, so the British waited. As long as Ranjit Singh was alive, the British did not dare to capture Punjab directly. Only after his death did the British attack and conquer Punjab. On the other hand, the Rajput rulers of Rajasthan were also very determined about their independence. Their geographical area, the desert, was also a challenge for the British. These were all reasons why the British took some areas under their direct rule and kept the rest as princely states. The British only ruled where they saw a direct benefit. In the states where there were no minerals or trading routes, the British did not think of exercising direct control. Besides this, they also found it a little difficult to handle India's diversity. In India, people of different religions, castes, and cultures live at every step. It was difficult to implement the same kind of rule everywhere. Therefore, through the princely states, they could avoid these hassles. In this way, it was a game of chess in which the British used some kings like their chess pieces. Apart from all of this, it is also important to understand why the British captured India. What was their primary motive? One thing must have immediately come to your mind: to make a profit, to take a lot of raw material from India, use it as a market to buy British goods. So, the first condition for profit is to invest minimum money and get maximum return. Therefore, taking control of very small states from which the British were not going to get any benefit would not have brought any major profit to the British. Now the question is, was the goal with which the British abandoned their strategy of occupation was successful? After all, were the relations between the British and the princely states friendly? The answer to this question is a bit layered, meaning it has two aspects. First, if you look superficially, it will seem that they had pretty good relationship with the states and were good friends. But if you look closely, this relationship was more like a master and servant relationship than friendship. I know some people might find this offensive, but the truth is largely this. See, after 1858, the British government adopted the policy of paramountcy. This meant that the British crown was the supreme ruler of India and all kings and princes were subordinate to it. If any king went against the British, he was immediately removed. Kings had to attend grand ceremonies in honor of the British emperor or queen. This relationship was not of respect but of control and domination. This made the king a ruler behind the curtain for their subjects. The kings thought they were ruling, but the real power lay with the British resident. So in a way, the states did have power, no doubt, but that power was only under the umbrella of the British. Not only this, the British Empire also took unfair advantage of this power. Just before India's independence, the British committed a great deception with these princely states. In 1947, when it came to giving independence to India, the British Parliament passed the Indian Independence Act. This act clearly stated that along with the partition of India, British paramountcy would also end. This meant that all the agreements the kings had with British would now terminated. The kings and princes had become free once again. But this freedom was a very big responsibility. Now suddenly, 565 princely states had to choose whether to join India or Pakistan. These kings and nawabs, who had considered their states a separate identity for centuries, now had to join a country. They were given the option to remain independent also, but it was practically not possible for those states to stay independent. This is why it was a very big trick by the British. The British knew that if these states declared themselves independent, India would be split into countless pieces. The British no longer needed to carry this burden. They had done their job and now they wanted to leave India. They were not worried about the huge challenge India would face because of these states. But this is where Sardar Patel, with his hard work, unified that part of India, which is why our map, Indian map, looks the way it does today. He talked to the kings of the states, persuaded them, and sometimes put pressure on them too. He did the impossible task of weaving the country together. Some states like Junagadh, Hyderabad and Jammu Kashmir initially refused to merge with India, but Sardar Patel's diplomacy and firmness made all of them a part of India. So, now you must have understood that the British did not capture all of India because they didn't need to. They created a system that gave them the opportunity to control India without fighting, without spending much money, and without much opposition. This is not just a historical fact, it is also a lesson. It teaches us that the great empires can be controlled not just by force but also by diplomacy and foresight. So friends, that's all for today. I hope you found this helpful. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more content. Let me know your thoughts in the comment below.